So welcome everyone to the speaker session with Sri Dinesh Khara.
Uh, First of all, thanks for giving an opportunity to be associated with the young minds and the bright minds who are into the sphere of economy and also in commerce. I think that is a kind of a audience which I'm going to address. So I think the topic which has been given is also the future of banking in India and our preparedness to stay relevant in the evolving scenario. Well, of course, I think the future is always uncertain. The number of unknowns which have grown as we have become more and more interconnected are the reasons for increasing the uncertainties. This actually reminds me of saying that the trouble with our times is that the future is not what it used to be. As more and more unknowns are getting connected, there are more and more opportunities also which unfolds. So that is what the challenge is, that how should an organization or an institution, I would say banking as an institution has got a history of more than 200 years plus. So how can it still remain relevant when so many more innovations are seen in the market? So many new players are coming into. So that is the kind of a challenge which all of us are facing in the banking sector and in the financial sector to enlarge the scope. Actually, with the advent of, if I start to break down the factors which are propelling these changes, the first among them is the technology and the competition which it brings along with it. All of you must be familiar with the term fintech. Fintechs actually refer to technology-enabled innovation in the financial services. This technological sea change in transforming the financial sector and the wider economy, affecting all aspects of our work, from payment to monetary policy to financial regulations. So all that is something which is captured by the fintech. And we also have big tech. Big tech firms are technology companies which are established and have got a database of their own. And they are primarily into the marketing of the digital services. Much is being said about the big tech and the fintech firms taking over the bank business. There are key differences between the two types of credit. In case of fintech, it acts more like a platform. It is in a position to offer an opportunity to the lender to choose the borrower out of the aggregated number of borrowers which they have. So at the same time, these fintech companies also have got the ability to understand the behavior of the borrowers, and then they're in a position to address the whole lot of asymmetry in the information, and they're in a position to offer that asymmetry information, which we call it a structured, unstructured data, which helps in taking credit decisions. Over time, we have seen that some platforms have moved to fund loans from institutional investors also. We have seen the advent of crowdfunding and many more such instruments which have been put to use. Fintech credit platforms essentially stays financial services. As I mentioned about big tech has got the additional advantage of their own database and have got a better sense of their behavior also. So actually it really helps them in onboarding the customers, whereas in case of fintech, they don't have their own customer base. So they are only relying upon the data which is structured, unstructured from the marketplace or from various other external sources. So that is actually what the big tech and the fintech are doing. To understand how fintech and big tech can threaten the bank, it is important to understand whether there is something unique about banks that makes it hard for them to be challenged by non-banks. Banks actually earn revenues from both sides of the balance sheet, as well as by the activities that do not show up on their balance sheet also. It is best to think of a large bank as a large portfolio of synergistic activities. Most of these activities are or could be undertaken by non-banks too. But banks and non-banks actually compete for these activities. Non-banks make loan to consumers and businesses, but they don't have the independent source of liabilities, which means that they cannot perhaps raise liabilities at the cheaper cost. So actually, if you really look at it, non-bank don't have a compliance cost. Banks have got a compliance cost. Non-banks have got a high cost for liabilities. Non-banks, banks have got a low cost of liabilities. Non-banks have got a high cost of liabilities. But if we really look at it to go beyond, because it's an era where the fairness or the low cost or the transparency is something which is going to have way for the institutions to survive. So I think in that context, perhaps banks have got a role to play for many, many more years to come. One, of course, they enjoy the confidence of a very large customer base. They've got a huge distribution network. It's not only physical distribution network, but also the digital distribution network, which is spread across. And actually, if you really look at it, the distribution network takes its own cost, and it's not easy to really develop those distribution network and to scale it up. And I think for any bank, guys, scaling up is something which holds the key, because it's only with the scaling up, the banks are in a position to really diversify their assets and also minimize the risk. So, which actually holds a very critical key. So for all purposes, I think liability is one major area where the non-banks are finding a handicap. And also when it comes to banks, they actually play on the capital and its efficiency. That is something which is not really seen in case of non-bank. So I would rather tend to say that banks can embrace the fintech innovations. And that is what we have seen also in last about more than 2 decades, when even in the banking system, when the technology was embraced, it actually led to a situation where whatever technology solutions are being offered by non-banks, they are also being offered by the banking system. But yes, of course, it's not a smooth play either. Because what happens is when banks started adopting technology, they went for the incremental technology adoption, and which led to a situation where perhaps it was not the most efficient way of delivering the technology related products. So eventually it so happened that on the OLTP, which is the online technology transaction processing platforms, we came out with many peripheral systems because it was an incremental development which we saw. And as a result of that, we were unable to make the best use of the peripheral system, and also at the same time, the number of transactions which are being handled by the banking system, it kept on mounting. So which led to a situation that we perhaps could not keep pace in terms of the technology development which was seen in case of non-bank, because non-bank were more like a non-legacy institutions. They were very younger institutions, and they could adopt to really have a very nimble-footed technology platform too. I think that is one major challenge which the banking system faces today. But yes, it's a challenge, but also there are opportunities. There's an attempt on the part of the banking system to adopt the technology which actually serves the purpose of the customers. Banks are in a position to gauge the customers' expectations. Banks are in a position to gauge the customer behavior much better, and they're in a position to offer solutions which are very much expected by these customers. In fact, when we look at the big tech firms, they can adopt the fintech innovations much more easily than the banks, as they have already got a digital platform in which these innovations can be incorporated without much of pain, which actually the banking system witnessed. In fact, if you really ask me, big tech firms have got the advantage of a very large customer base, and they have got the advantage of being nimble-footed when it comes to their technology capabilities also. So in fact, in that kind of a context, what should a bank do? I would say that change is something which is a reality, which all of us accept. And resisting change is actually an exercise in futility. With growing acceptability of the digital channel for the banking, as also for the proliferation of the tech fins offering various banking, para-banking solutions, we also are trying to figure out that how can we really process many of the transactions outside our core banking and then push it into the core banking system, which will actually improve the customer experience. And at the same time, it will help us in changing our legacy technology systems over a period of time. In fact, I would like to mention that here, since we are handling so many transactions, there is a lot of value when it comes to upgradation of technology is concerned. And that's why we are having the required wherewithal to take care of the technology needs for the banks and also to take care of the customers' need. Increasingly, we in the banking system are relying more and more on the analytics. We are actually depending on the huge data which all of us have with us. All these years, the data used to be static, but now we're in a position to run various algorithms on this data to really understand the customer behavior, and we're in a position to reach out to the customer with the offerings which probably they were thinking of. So that is something which has happened in the recent past, and I'm sure going forward we'll be in a position to customize our products and services to a greater extent, which perhaps entities which are non-bank, which may not have as much of resources, they may not be in a position to do. And to that extent, banks will certainly bring in a challenge for the non-banks also. As I mentioned that the non-banks and the banks are in a position to reach out to the customers. They're in a position to offer the products and services which are akin to the banking. Whereas when it comes to the non-bank, they have got a customer base and they're in a position to offer the products which are through the digital medium, more so through the digital medium. They are not having as much of insight into the customer behavior, particularly in the financial sector. So that way, I think banks have created a niche for themselves for many, many more years to come. So, but also it may not be out of place to mention that as we are seeing more and more such adoptions of technology, the regulators are also becoming equally concerned. So the regulatory oversight on the banking system is increasing quite a lot. That kind of a regulatory oversight is not there for the non-banks, as much into non-banks for the operations. So to that extent, as far as the customer confidence is concerned, the regulatory oversight and the trust of these banking institutions perhaps steal a march over the non-bank, and that's why there's a reason for banks to stay on for many, many more years. It may not stay in the current form. It might undergo a change, but I think the banking system will stay. Another factor that is propelling change in the evolving needs of the economy is actually the traditional banks in India have lent to firms which are having physical infrastructure. If you really look at it, if we look at the composition of the GDP, a very significant composition of the GDP is coming from the services sector. So naturally, we have to figure out ways and means how we can lend to the services sector. And to really lend to the services sector, the algorithm which has been developed in terms of the credit scores, that perhaps holds the key. And I think banks have got the systems and they have got the LGDs available for the various category of customers, and based on those LGDs, they're in a position to come out with their own credit scores, apart from depending upon the external rating agencies when it comes to the assessment of various entities or individuals. So I think to that extent, banks have adapted themselves with the passage of time, and I'm sure with the further changes, they will continue to adapt. Of course, there is increasing uncertain environment, which is also seen, and particularly more so it comes in the context of the capital, because when it comes to banking system, it's more of a capital guzzler. When it comes to the efficiency of capital, that is something which is very critical for the banking system. And unless and until the assets are managed well, unless and until earnings are managed well, there is a challenge for the banking system to raise the capital and also to grow further. So I think to that extent, it's a task very clearly cut out for the banking system to ensure that they're in a position to manage their affairs well, they're in a position to handle the assets pretty well, and also they're in a position to mitigate the risk which are inherent in these assets. So for that, a very comprehensive risk assessment is the need of the hour, and that is something which is being developed by the banking system. So a lot of investment is being done by the banking system to really master the art of understanding risk and also offering the mitigants, which goes a long way. And also for an economy like ours, which has essentially remained banking oriented, and it has not really witnessed as much of the equity market as perhaps some of the economies in the West, more so from US kind of geographies we have seen. So I think in that context, it's when it comes to supporting larger business ventures, it is the banks which will have the wherewithal. They will be the one which will be in a position to lend to such kind of infrastructure creation, lend for various economic activities. And I think till such time the capital market grows, the dependence on the banking system will continue to grow. There are many other challenges which are there for the system, which may not be of much of interest for you guys. But I would like to mention that banks in India have to focus on technology. They have to focus on capital. They have to focus on changing business models and the customer's taste to stay relevant. Changes are happening and we must embrace them. That is something which we believe. And with this, I'll come to the end and by saying that we cannot become what we need to by remaining what we are, which means change is a constant, will continue to change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The Indian banking sector, as a major part of the Indian economy, has been witnessing turbulent times. The NPA problem is unresolved, and there is a hullabaloo with the privatization of public sector banks as well. The State Bank of India has been playing an integral role in handling this issue and has adapted and evolved its functioning to changing times. Throughout the years, Sir has climbed through the ranks, and he is currently serving as the 26th chairperson of the State Bank of India. With over 36 years of experience in the banking sector, he also led one of the most crucial mergers of modern India to create a banking behemoth. It was truly a great experience hearing from you. We have some questions that the audience wanted to ask. Maybe go ahead with those.
Sure, please.
Thank you, sir. The first question is that bad banks are currently the method that we are relying on to solve the twin balance sheet problem. However, they face the challenge of developing good, sustainable models for the same. How successfully do you think that they will clean up this issue?
Well, if you really look at it, the banking system witnessed a lot of NPAs, and those NPAs actually came to surface somewhere in the year 2014. And if you look into the history why those NPAs came into existence, the history goes back to as old as about 2007-8. 2007-8 was the time when a lot of money was flowing into the system. And when a lot of money was flowing into the system, many entrepreneurs came and set up entities where they had not having adequate experience. So it led to a situation where they over-leveraged themselves. They over-leveraged, then they could not perform well, and that led to a situation where the assets turned NPA. So naturally, 2014 onwards, various kind of efforts were made to really clean up the system. And the cleanup of the system happened by providing into the banking system. It was by way of providing more and more capital. So naturally, as far as those loans were concerned, they were staying as it is on the bank's balance sheet. So the bank's balance sheets were relieved of this pressure by taking them to the asset reconstruction company's route. ARC, as it is, they were only custodian of these assets. they were charging the management fee of managing these assets, but de facto there was no management of these assets happening. So this new concept of bad bank is actually a blend of both. It is a ARC plus AMC. And ARC is essentially more like an aggregator. So it will aggregate the assets from various banks. And thereafter, the asset management companies will be there, which will help in resolving these assets. And in this context, I think I would like to draw attention of all of you to the fact that about 3 years back, there was an insolvency code which was introduced into the country, and it got introduced for the first time. By virtue of that insolvency code, there was a whole lot of ecosystem which came into existence, which was essentially they were having the wherewithal of managing these companies, while the management was taken over by the committee of creditors. So de facto board of the company was removed, and that role was assumed by the committee of creditors. So that was a point of time when the ecosystem, the various other players also came into existence. So now at this stage, when we are thinking in terms of setting up the bad bank, it's a point of time when assets which will be aggregated by ARC will not stay only with ARC. They will rather be created, they will be in a position to create value because they will be buyers. The players in the ecosystem would be in a position to showcase value of these assets, and the buyers would be in a position to come and offer value. It may not be out of place to mention that normally we have seen that when we come to a stage where we move on to the growth track, invariably, when it comes to the capacity utilization, it starts getting consumed very fast. So at that point of time, if at all any greenfield project has to be laid out, it has got a minimum time, which will gestation time of about minimum 5 years time. So as compared to that, a brownfield capacity which is available through such resolutions, that will be something which can be picked up, and some little tweaks, and it can actually start generating cash. So to that extent, it makes a whole lot of economic value. And I think, I hope and the bad bank will be positioned to preserve and maybe enhance the value of such assets. And perhaps for a capital deficient economy like ours, it is going to be I would say, a blessing, which will probably help this country to grow further and further.
So the second question being, the use of blockchain technology in the banking sector is a fairly recent phenomenon. SBI has recently joined JP Morgan's blockchain-based network to speed up overseas transactions. How do you feel it's going to transform the banking space, sir?
Well, you see, the payment system of late is becoming very complex, and more so the regulatory mechanism which is there across the globe. And I would like to say that in the context of each of the jurisdictions have got their own regulation, which is maybe OFAC, maybe something known as maybe KYC, AML regulations, which actually means that there could be query at any point of time during the journey of any payment. And normally, when it comes to international trade and commerce, we have got the payment system which is lubricated very well by various correspondent banks across the globe. So in that kind of a scenario, if at all there are questions in between by various regulators who are there when the journey of the payment is happening, if at all this kind of a system would not have been there, it would have created a lot of inefficiencies. The kind of questions which would have been raised, they need to be replied, and perhaps they need to be replied during the course of the journey itself, and it cannot go back and forth. So to that extent, when it comes to blockchain, one, of course, it helps in dealing with these kind of issues in a very, very proficient manner. And apart from that, it also helps in reconciliation in a very big way, because it's more like when it comes to a distributed ledger, and it's a distributed ledger which has got an access by various players, and it is based on, of course, very strong credentials verification. So that whosoever enters into this distributed ledger across should have the requisite rights before they really carry out any kind of a transaction on the blockchain. So I think with the increasing number of payments which are being handled by the trade and commerce, and being major role being played by the banks, blockchain actually holds a key for bringing in efficiency and also reducing the cost of such payments, and improving the delivery and the efficiency at the same time.
Our last question, sir. Open banking allows third parties to access financial information and develop services and is gaining popularity. However, it may pose risks to consumers as more of the data is shared more widely. With increased concerns about data privacy, what do you think is the future of such banking spaces?
I think open banking is going to stay, as we are observing that it's going to be more and more of a platform banking. And we are also observing that there are many niche players who are coming in the market space. So they have got relevance and value for what they are doing. So from that point of view, I would say that open banking will be in a position to create value for the customers. And we have already seen across the globe, in many geographies, it has already become a reality. So I think this will be very much there. But the kind of a control mechanism which is required, because what happens is that in case of open banking, when you are sharing the data of the customer, then there is of course, it will be shared only if at all customer will give the consent. But at the same time, it is equally incumbent on the person whom the passover happens. He should also be in a position to protect the data like the primary holder of the data was protecting. So I think it will become a chain. And with the open banking coming in, it will be a chain of multiple institutions who would have a responsibility. Law will become even tougher when it comes to the secrecy rights are concerned, when it comes to privacy rights are concerned. So law will become even tougher, and that will eventually lead to a situation where all players whosoever will be participating in the open banking, they will have a combined responsibility to ensure the protection of the critical financial data of the customer. So I think you rightly apprehended that there are risks, but considering the value which it will create, perhaps all the entities will have to join hands and ensure that the protection and the security increases in the ecosystem also. It is not merely at the bank level, but even at the ecosystem level also, the protection will be ensured.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule and speaking with us. It was great listening to all your stories and your ideas about fintech and technologies and innovation, the advantages, disadvantages, liability management, and the core banking system.